Hey everyone! Thank you so much for coming out on a not Sunday morning. The parties last night were very good. You should definitely go to the ones tonight because the parties are so good. You lose track of your days. But yeah, thank you for coming out to your Saturday morning session on gaining client opportunities, and we'll be talking more about some like how you can get clients, how you can keep clients, how you can keep them coming back. Maybe occasionally how you fire clients, because that can be a wonderful experience in its own right when it has to happen. So I figured we would kind of go around and introduce ourselves. So Kat.
Hi, I'm Kat. I'm Kat Wendt. I am a marketing and PR manager at Greenheart Games, but I've also been freelancing for since 2001, so a long time. I've been in the game industry for about 8 years and done a variety of things. So yeah.
And I'm Abby Joslin, and in addition to doing lots of work for the Georgia Game Developers Association, I'm also a small business coach. So I work with folks with tech or creative startups who just need help on the business side of things, like figuring out some business strategy things or how to get clients. So a bunch of different things. So I'm definitely on the services side, doing a lot in the game industry.
Hi, and I'm Menard. I am a freelance designer and consultant, and as it inevitably happens, and your studio shuts down around you, what do? I decided, why don't I just do this on my own? Whee! So I have just kind of the more practical, like, starting from the ground up, I have no idea what I'm doing, to like, I think I might maybe not have so much of an idea what I'm doing now, but at least it's better.
All right, my name is Troy Hipolito. I'm the owner of ISO Interactive. It's a local game company. We deal with a lot of stuff like Unity 3D, Flash games, Facebook, a lot of mobile stuff, and a lot of just traditional interactive. I think I've been working in the interactive field for since 2006. I've gone through the freelance stage from having a big office, from working remotely, and just have a variety of experience with good, bad, and the ugly.
And we might even get to hear some of those ugly stories, if we're lucky, and ask nicely. So maybe a good place to start this might be like gaining clients, because before you can talk about managing them or firing them or the horror stories that can ensue, you have to actually get some clients in the door. So I'm just going to open this up. Like, what are some of your favorite ways to find and identify new or particularly good clients?
I guess I could start. The first thing I would suggest is to identify yourself and what your target market is. What are you good at? What can you do well versus what you have to do to make money. I tend to look at it in twofold. If you are truly starting out, you want to look like you're a consultant and not a company. There's a lot of clients here in Atlanta that won't pay for a company, but they'll pay for a contractor or independent. And so developing your website accordingly is important. If you look at my website, it's obviously a company. So there's certain clients that I'm not able to obtain because of that. Being on the consultant and freelance arena and looking like you are consulted via all your media, website, social items allows the client to feel a little more safe for particular type of budgets.
And the games industry is really, really tiny. Your extended personal network is honestly your best asset, especially when you're just starting out. I cannot overstate the importance of referrals and word of mouth, like more than anything, especially when you're starting out and gaining your first couple of clients. Because normally when a studio needs someone fast, like, oh crap, we have to finish this level, we need just another warm body in a seat to do stuff for like a month or two, they're gonna go to people they either know personally or know through a friend. Because you don't have the time to vet someone you had never heard of from across the country, or like, well, we don't have time to go through resumes. It's just like, hey, do you know anyone who does this? And those are the kind of relationships you want to really work on building and nurturing. It's your extended network across different studios, different kinds of studios. Make sure you're friends with producers, programmers, artists, designers, all those people, because you never know when their boss will come to them and be like, hey, do you know someone who does these things? And you want to make sure that you're always first in that person's mind, like, oh yeah, that person, why don't we contact them?
And it really takes a while to build those relationships.
Yes.
Like, you can't just like walk up to somebody at a conference who you just met like, Kat, I help.
Yeah, it's interesting with the networking too, because there's the making friends with people, but there's also making sure they know what you do.
Yeah.
So like, if somebody's looking for PR and you're known as, oh yeah, the person in Atlanta who does indie PR, like that's really helpful to make sure you're clear about what you do. Because some people who are trying to look for client work will be like, well, I do accounting and I do game art and I do this and I do this and I do this and I do this, and so no one remembers what you do because it's too many things. So really focusing on like who you are to people.
Sadly, I do all the things is not a really good professional job description, even if it's kind of true.
Yeah.
Like it has to be specific things.
Yeah, and you can focus on a few for a while, and once you've sort of expanded that part of your client base, you can refocus later. But it's really important that it's easy to remember and short.
Well, and just having like a really short, really descriptive, easy to reel out spiel about yourself and what you do and what you're interested in helps people make that connection. So every time they talk to you, you mention it, sort of.
Yeah, it's usually called an elevator pitch because
Yeah.
it's got to be short enough that on an elevator ride you could get it out to the other person.
Yeah, and literally 30 seconds. Time yourself on your phone standing in front of a mirror if you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, you may also have several elevator pitches depending on who you're targeting. So if you know who you're targeting, your specialties could be slightly different because you may know what they're looking for.
Yeah.
One major thing that I've had challenges with is that I've always been very good at what I do, but I don't have much of a personality. So people have to like you. If they don't like you, they'll only hire you when they have to. And you kind of want to avoid that. You don't want to be the guy that's, oh, he's so hard to work with or whatever, You want to be flexible. You want to be the person like, hey, I want to work with this guy because he's not only good at what he does, and maybe person B may be slightly better, but I don't like person B. People hire you because they like you first, and the secondary is for your skills. It should be the other way around, but not really.
Yeah, and it speaks broadly to your reputation in general, because there's having people know who you are, and then there's like, oh, that's the person who did, that cruddy thing at a party, or, you have to be careful about your behavior when it can be observed.
At 9 o'clock, I'm
or Twitter
sponsoring.
fits, or, various things that happen. So,
Yeah, you don't want to be the dude who like passes out at 9 o'clock in the morning because you're still knocking back shots.
Yeah.
And puking in the corner. That gets noticed and remembered.
Yeah,
the
like
dude
you want to curate your public presence really carefully.
You are your marketer. You're your own person, and
you are your
own
brand.
HR department.
Yeah.
You are everybody. You don't want to be the person who spills company secrets because you're the gossip person. That's not good.
Yeah.
Because it makes you feel better about yourself to be in the know.
Yeah, it's so funny. I've run into people at parties and they're like, I'll just meet them and they're like, so friendy A, and I'm like, no, don't tell me that story. I just met you. You have no idea like who I would tell it to, or it's just not.
You would totally tell everyone.
Me personally?
I mean, because your PR
I'm tweeting
background.
it right now. No, I'm good at keeping secrets.
Well, and you also have to be careful about what you promise to people too.
Yeah.
And not like whether that's, and you've got to keep your promises and not overpromise too.
20 million downloads.
Because especially, again, tiny industry if you do a crap job, because you said, oh God, I'm sure I can teach myself this by tomorrow.
Yeah, under promise, over deliver. So I guess we could talk about setting expectations.
Yeah,
for
go
clients.
for it.
It's really important when you like after you've met the people and you've had the job referred to you or the gig referred to you, to make sure you're very clear about what they want and what you're able to provide them. That includes the timeline, the specifics of what you're going to do in a fair amount of detail, because otherwise scope creep happens, and it can really get out of control if you've not sort of gotten things laid out really early on in the process.
Well, and one of my all-time favorite tools is actually Postit Notes and a pen. And so, you've gotten your client, here are the conversations, here are the things that need to go into those conversations. Just like write those things down on Post-it notes and map out your process for, whether it's, I've just had my initial conversation with somebody and we've talked about this, here's the contract, here's the deposit, here's the first appointment and how you get it set up. I mean, it's just how you manage client expectations, like totally ties into that because you know exactly what's happening when. like during a process.
And a lot of this stuff is product delivery, so also include things like number of revisions and how feedback will be handled, because the last thing you want is to think you're done with the job and then a month later, oh, hi, yeah, so, we totally changed stuff in the studio, so can you redo this stuff you did for us? Sure, I'll charge you again, because we remember that was in the contract, 2 revisions, timeline, feedback.
Yeah.
We're now done. We can absolutely start a new contract now, but no, you are not entitled to more of my time now at this moment unless we now talk about paying for it.
I like to do number of revisions and then the hourly rate for the
Yes,
additional
exactly.
stuff. Yeah, so that it's very clear, like, it's
Yeah.
going to cost you.
There's definitely 2 different ways to charge clients in general,
Yeah.
and within those 2 different ways, there's these subcategories. You have time and material, which is always best, and then you have fixed cost. Fixed cost, especially in gaming, because I've done some complicated games, it's very difficult because each client has a unique aspect of what they want. And a lot of clients don't really know what they want until after they see it. So having a fixed budget on a lot of these things, even if you estimate well, is it's a little scary. Even with the amount of revisions and that sort of thing, there's certain expectations that the client sees out in the world that he may think will happen within a very small group.
Yeah, it's also helpful there to define your scope, because then if you've done that and the project starts exceeding it because they had these expectations they didn't communicate to you, you can then say, I'm happy to do those additional things, but this is the additional cost.
I mean, one really nice thing about a fixed price, though, is that on the client end, people can sometimes just be really comforted by knowing exactly what a project will cost, but you really need to know the ins and outs of that project and how you work and what's actually involved in it.
Yeah.
And it also depends on the scope of it, because sometimes you're
Yeah.
only doing a very tiny piece of their whole project, and
Yeah.
that is a lot easier to do a fixed price on.
Yeah.
Than something you're taking from really start to ship.
Yeah. Also, an hourly rate can sometimes punish you for being fast.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and sometimes clients can be kind of weird and say, well, it's hourly, so are you padding your hours?
Yeah.
Because you want to make more money off of me? And
Yeah.
Yeah, hours seem to be padded when there's a lot of back and forth. So managing the, I think management, because I always have good resources, period. Anyone I work with are really good at what they do. I just don't work with them. However, management is probably 90% of the success of a project. And it's, it starts with the contracts, the SAL or the GDD or however you want to call it. And SAL is a statement of work. Formulating that in a proper way, with the beginning of it having the synopsis of the game or the project, and then breaking it down to those specific details. But you also have to be very careful in your entry of talking to the clients that it's simple enough for them to understand. A lot of the clients really don't know the space. So if you give them something very complicated at first, they may not grasp that. You want to go as friendly as possible and with enough detail in order to actually close some kind of agreement in order to you to produce a statement of work or have them pay you to do that. Time is money. For example, I personally don't have any Atlanta clients anymore. All my clients are around the world. So all my stuff is based on my reputation. And you guys, I would imagine majority of it's local. And you have to determine how much your time is worth. What are you willing to give in order to get a project? What's the chance of actually getting that project? I usually have the 3 meeting rules. After the 3rd meeting, or maybe 4th, it's no longer a meeting, it's consulting. And you should be, you should be compensated for some of your time. And so I politely say after 3 or 4 meetings to the client, I say, well, I can no longer allocate any more time to this. I would have to, just charge you for my time in order to either build a statement of work, figure out what you really, really want, and that's okay too. You don't have to gouge the client at all. You could definitely charge them 10 hours to formulate a plan or whatever needs to happen after that 3rd meeting, and it's totally acceptable. Or 10, 20, 30, whatever it takes, depending on the project.
Well, and that actually brings up a great point, which is like identifying the clients you do not want to work with. So like, what are some of your favorite red flags other than, hey, I want to talk to you forever and have all these meetings?
If they want to haggle like forever and ever and ever and ever about the cost, usually it's not the greatest client.
But yeah, endless haggling. Like, it's one thing to discuss the price and to maybe say, hey, since if I pay, what happens if I pay you the full rate up front? Can I get a discount? But if it's like, oh, your hourly rate's really that.
Yeah, I found that the people who tend to want to pay very little are the ones who seem to have the highest, like weirdly high expectations that are just unreasonable. Not like good work, but just kind of outrageous outside of the normal scope of what you should be doing expectations.
And sometimes you can control for that a little bit, just with like really focusing on the value of what you're providing.
Yeah.
But yeah, endless haggling is
Not good.
it wastes your time.
Yeah.
And if they really can't afford your services, then they're not a good client for you. And
Yeah, like don't sell yourself short
Yeah.
just because you think you need the work or you really want the work. I mean, your time is worth money, and then it's better spent to be actually looking for good clients than taking crappy jobs for
And
like half
it
pay.
also affects the industry and
Yes,
what
it does.
people expect from us, essentially. So if we're charging almost nothing, or if we're doing things that just aren't, it's bad for everyone else.
yeah, it undercuts the industry. It drives
Yeah.
down over the average rate, and people start saying, "Oh, you're super expensive. Why?" And yet, weirdly enough, if you charge more, sometimes people trust you more because they say, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay."
Yeah, pricing is a really difficult thing. Getting your rates right and learning how to estimate appropriately. It takes a while to sort of get a good feel.
There are individuals that just can't estimate. I work with developers that have been doing it for like 15 years. They're awful, and it's just some,
It still fundamentally blows my mind. They can still be so bad.
Oh my gosh, yes. So personally, I was in engineering, and then I was a graphic designer, then a web designer, then a game designer, then a UX, and a programmer as well. So I'm kind of rare that I've actually sat in these different spots. And so my specialty is actually, either creative lead or management, the project management. And so what I tend to do is I estimate the hours ahead of time, and then I give it to the developer or the designer. And I said, this is what I think is happening. I said, I'm not the designer and developer. You're responsible for this. Can you make these hours? And they say yes or no. And then I say, why can you make these hours? Let's talk about a simple task. For example, designing a character, so I can create this character. I have to sketch them. We have to model them out. We have to prep the model for Unity. We have to make sure all the bones and animations are going to be working. We'll have prefixed model, So you have these different tasks and set and stuff. So you think I think it takes this amount of time. But a lot of these designers, developers are not working on just one project. So if you're working on two projects, you not only have to cut the time in half or double the length of the time, you have to realize that 4 hours is not half as efficient as 8. The meat of your work is in the middle. So if you get into a project, you become a lot faster as you're going through it. The slow parts are the beginning and end, and all those things take into account on estimation. Excuse me. Another major thing that I found out that when estimating things wrong is you forget about the client. You forget about internal approvals. How many client approvals? How long does it take to schedule the client? And so those things have to take into account, because if you give an estimate that's more than 10 or 15% off your original thing, the client's gonna have something to say about it. He's not gonna want to pay for it.
And rightfully so, because that's you screwed up.
Yeah.
But just with poor planning, and it could have probably been prevented. And when you do screw up, it's like, okay, so how do you make it right? And hopefully it won't just be, oh, I'm not going to pay somebody, because that's again a shit way to do business.
Yeah.
There are complications though that is very difficult to estimate until you're into it, and some of those things can be explained. We're actually doing a very like a $1 million Facebook game, right? Which seems like a lot. It's not really in the realm of games and all that. It's not that much. But the previous client, he produced like $100,000 or $170,000 a day on the previous game, And so he kind of knows what he wants for the most part, but he doesn't know all the technical details of this new game that we're producing for him. And there are certain features that we think, even as a developer, like, it shouldn't be this hard. You know, but when you get into it, it's like, oh man, there's like 20 other things it's talking to. And sometimes you are wrong in the estimates, but the best thing that you can do to, I guess you said, make it right, is to be very, to be properly vocal to the client.
Yeah, as soon as you know there's a problem.
And
Yeah.
be honest, don't try to hide stuff or like beat around the bush about things. Like be upfront about it. Be like, look, this was like, say with scope creep, this is what we talked about, and this was the price for that. However, all these things happened. And so, you know, it's work with them and be honest about it. They more than likely will be willing to at least meet you somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Speaking of the middle, I mean, that could mean different things.
Yeah,
You know,
it really varies.
because I have one developer, he's really good, and he can do 2D, 3D, AS3, Unity programming, but he's horrible at time management, and there's nothing you can do. You know, you have to call him in the morning to make sure he's on. You know, you have to tell him to stop working so he can sleep. And he's got a very short leash or whatever. You got to keep a short leash on that individual.
And for the record, you have to be fucking awesome to merit
It's
that
like
level
power
of,
to you for
Yeah.
doing
of like hand holding.
it. You're far more patient than I am.
Yeah.
I have to make sure my rent's paid. You know,
Yeah.
I have to make sure my bill's paid. You know, I have a car. You know, I have children, so I have to make sure those people eat. So I have to make sure my job is on point. You know, and not to be a jerk about it. I mean, everyone that works with me knows how I am. I'm a little very detail oriented because that's what the client's going to appreciate. And so I have certain rules that even pull me back. You know, when you're doing these projects, and I say, well, you know what? If they have to work the weekend, it happens. You know, well, I'm not going to tell them Friday. I'm not telling them Thursday. They're going to find out Monday or Tuesday if this is happening. So you want to be very respectful for everyone's time and their personal time. And the thing that I was mentioning when I told him I had to make sure he stops working because he's totally messed up the next day. And so you don't want to go through that where he's no good and then there's a client meeting and he has to sit on it and all this other stuff. So you have to have that level of consistency and not just in working ethics, but consistency in producing your milestones and that sort of thing in work.
And especially with so many global clients now, like I work with a lot of people out of Israel, so there's not only a massive like time zone difference where you're like, oh, we'll just meet in the morning. Oh, I'm sorry, you're 3 in the morning. Well, that won't work. But keep in mind sometimes with like just holidays and things, you're like, oh yeah, we'll just talk on Friday, except they're not at work on Friday. And so you kind of look like an ass where you're like, yeah, we'll just do this tomorrow. And they're like, it's the Sabbath. You're like, sorry, I'm horrible. So you just, do a little bit of research, know your clients, because things are different all around the world.
In Argentina, they have like 1 million holidays too.
They do. They really do.
Like, it's a holiday. I said, can?
Well, and that actually it comes to a really good client management point, which is have some sort of system or process set up so that you can keep notes about clients and their preferences.
Yes.
So, for instance, if you're working with like folks in Israel, Sabbath.
Yep.
Or Argentina, like just note down those holidays and.
But then they're back on work on Sunday. You're like, damn it.
Well, the
Yeah,
people from
and just make-
Argentina,
yeah.
some people from Argentina work for me, so
Yeah.
they have to kind of let me know ahead of time, which is
Yeah.
actually better.
But yeah, I mean, if you keep track of all of that, it like helps give your clients just better experiences working with you, and because the happier they are with the end product and the process, like it's not pulling teeth. They're upfront when there's scope creep or something happens. You say, here's what we need to do to fix things and get them back on track, so that you're happy. I mean, happy clients come back to you,
Yeah.
and
they also
and
refer you
refer
to other
you,
people.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, referral is incredibly important.
Yeah, it's like 80%, 90% of all your business.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
all my work is done outside of the state, and so I have to depend heavily on reputation. So I even have a page where I have all the high-pay clients and all this other stuff. So the clients actually come to me. They already want me to work for them. It's just a price negotiation usually and one level of vetting out. And so they'll reach out to some clients and stuff like that to make sure I am who I say I am and I can do what I can do and that sort of thing. And if the price negotiations don't work out, it's probably not a good deal for anyone.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, but it also took you a while to build up to that point, to the point where they just more or less come find you and get those referrals.
And that's more on the rare side.
Yeah.
I have some colleagues that do the same thing that I do that are actually doing even better than I am. And a lot of it has to do with not just the due diligence, but the personality of the head, of an individual. There's travel involved. There's planning. I was meeting client A, B, and C. They're showing that how you can introduce services without being pushy.
Yeah.
Using LinkedIn properly without spamming, and those type of things.
Give an example of your favorite LinkedIn spam.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't want to do that.
It makes me sad.
But there's things that I do that could be considered spam that I have tweaked. And one thing that I have, I don't know, several thousand people. There's a Mac, I don't know what it is, on my LinkedIn. And what I do is if I'm in the middle of a new project and I'm excited about that project and maybe I have a video for the project or something like that, I get permission from the client. Say, I know we're not done, but can I show what we're working on? But I won't put a name on it. I won't put a client on it. But I want to say something about the client. What did the client do before? How was it successful before? And what are we doing that's going to be successful? And I'll send a link out to everyone. Hey guys, hi, this is what we're doing. That is something I do maybe once every 4 to 6 months.
Yeah.
And then you get a good range of people. And on LinkedIn, and of course you send it to email and other social media platforms and stuff like that. And a lot of stuff like LinkedIn, you'll get a response like a month later. And you can just mention, hey, we're just open for other projects.
Yeah, it helps remind people you exist.
Yep. Without being super spammy and terrible.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to do the monthly, weekly, like this is what we're up to.
No.
Yeah, they don't want to.
Yeah, making it organic can be sometimes tricky, and it's tough. I'm naturally introverted, so whenever I sort of broadcast things out like that, it feels like am I bothering anyone? And you have to sort of, if you're an introvert, you have to learn how to get past that and what the appropriate things are to actually push
Make
out.
it less mechanical.
Yeah.
I definitely had that issue with a lot of stuff because I'm a yes or no person. I make things happen versus most humans, they want to, you need to identify what makes them, identify their real need, what their pain is, with the client. And I don't know about you, but I have a hard time reading people.
As you creepily.
Well,
Via my creepy smile.
it's kind of like the difference between answering questions that people have and solving their problem. Because they're not always the same thing.
And you have to identify their problem, and that's one of the major issues,
We also just had a hand pop up.
So you guys are talking about being introverts and having a hard time reaching out to people. You're going to have people like that at a convention like this. I'm curious if you, over time, developed certain strategies or taught yourself.
I call them coping mechanisms.
I think that the more you force yourself to do the things that make you uncomfortable in terms of, like, people read me as very bubbly and very extroverted. I am very shy. But the more I do it, the better it is, especially like once I know more people in a room, the room is less scary in terms of my introversion. So the networking actually helps make it less intimidating.
Yeah.
It's kind of like getting into shape. You don't start going to the gym in shape. You go there to become in shape. So like you don't go to a networking event thinking, I am awesome. I have all these friends here. Everyone loves me. Like, no, you go to it, you have some key points that you want to talk to people. And my personal favorite is just ask people about themselves because people love to talk about themselves. We are so fucking self-centered.
Well,
So just get them
She's
talking about
absolutely right.
themselves and people will be happy. They'll think you're lovely. And towards the end of the conversation, it becomes more natural to exchange business cards or at some point, usually, unless they're completely and utterly self-centered people, they'll probably say, oh, so what about you? What do you do?
Yeah.
And that gives you a really easy opening.
And if that's too scary, if like face-to-face talking is too scary, I recommend like doing research. I like to observe, I like to analyze, I like to plan and know what I'm getting into before I do a thing. So I will identify people who are doing something similar to what I hope to be doing, not like pie in the sky aspiration, but sort of the next step, the next level I would like to hit. And I sort of check out what they're doing, what their process is, and try and learn from it. Because I think when you learn several people's approaches, you can kind of pick the pieces that feel most comfortable to you and apply those.
And kind of to some extent what you're talking about is just basic confidence building in yourself and your public speaking skills, how you interact with other people. If you don't want to screw it up with like potential possible clients, go practice somewhere else. Like go join an improv group. It sounds stupid.
Improv
Go do
groups are
theater.
great.
Like I was stupid shy until I started doing theater. They're like, oh yeah, whatever, just get up and do stupid crap in front of people all the time. And like go to like, meetups and stuff and just
Toastmasters
like practice
and various things.
Toastmasters
Yeah.
is
just practice
fantastic.
talking to other people that don't actually matter to your first impression. Practice on those people,
Yeah.
so then when you actually have potential clients, you're good to go.
And if anyone here is a student, speech and debate team is
Yeah.
really amazing. I did because I recognized I was shy really early on, I actually did a lot of theater, speech and debate, choir, performance-oriented stuff to try and get myself more comfortable. And that's how I sort of got
It
this
helps. It really does.
bubbly external persona, because that's very carefully crafted. It's not
It's a
just
skill
how I
set.
was. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a skill. These
Yeah.
people, they come off as natural. They honed that. They spent time perfecting that. No one's that natural, that good at it.
And if it is something that causes you extraordinary anxiety and is extremely hard, sometimes you can partner up with someone who's extroverted and take care of different elements to help balance each other out.
It's like having a wingman at a bar when you're dating. Like
Yeah.
sometimes it's really nice to just have someone who can say, like, so I might be in a conversation with Kat, and I might say, and we're talking to somebody else, and I say, oh, well, Kat does marketing. If they say express something marketing related.
Yeah.
And because that also ties in some social trust issues as well, because it's sort of like reading Amazon reviews. You know that a lot of those are purchased, but we still give them a certain amount of trust anyway, because it's like, oh, somebody took the time to write a review about this who's not me.
Yeah. Not quite related to introversion, but how do you guys feel about referral incentives? Some people really
Well-
dislike them. Some people find it helpful.
I go back and forth on them, but
Yeah.
it depends.
One
And
thing that you
we should
brought up
probably-
as far as the meetup groups, I go to at least one meetup either once a week or once every 2 weeks, even if I don't like the people. Like if you're introvert, sometimes you just don't like people,
Amen.
And you have to go in there and interact with people that you have no interest with. You have to break the ice, you have to go through it, and it's like, how can I go there and understand and listen what they're saying without looking like a jerk, And it takes practice, not only the meetup groups, when we're talking about LinkedIn, one thing, as a colleague of mine, his name is Federico, he has an IT business and he does fairly well. And, he's coached me on a lot of things, on what to do and what LinkedIn's used for versus if you got their email, why would you link them in, Why would you try sending LinkedIn emails unless it's just that once a report type 6-a-month thing or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and
But-
for the in-person stuff, you can even get a list of canned questions that are good for small talk, or get yourself prepared so you have something beyond so the weather was really pretty today,
Sports
and
ball.
then
Sports ball.
yeah, deeper questions.
But
to
one
move
thing that you were
things.
saying was how people talk to themselves about themselves.
Yeah.
And that's one of Federico's, and I will mention him because he does very well on LinkedIn. He goes, hey, I noticed that we've been connected for a while, but I really don't know what you do. And I was just curious on, and you have to word it in a nice way, but your response is much higher than, hey, we're open for work.
Yeah.
It's just totally
Yeah.
two different vibes, two different
Yeah.
conversations, because sometimes you can't cut to the end. You need that 4, 5, 6 conversations, via email or phone calls or whatever it is, minus, facing interviews or whatever,
Yeah.
facing meetings, excuse me, to get them saying, okay, I kind of like this person. I think I'm willing to go the next step.
Yeah.
'Cause
It's
you-
also-
you
oh,
could be.
sorry.
I'm sorry. You could be a total rock star. Well, just because you're a rock star, they don't know who you are. They don't know who you are.
It takes time to build those relationships.
It does. It's also nice to find out what their preferred communication style is. For example, there are plenty of people who love talking on the phone. I hate it. But you need to adapt to what their preferred style is for figuring things out. Because I would normally just send an email with all the information or get on IM, but some people really need the actual talking it out in real time to get their heads around something. And then there are the people who prefer to email like I do, or various other things. So sort of figuring out what lights them up and gets them talking, which medium, is helpful to getting them to continue.
I've hired probably over the years 7 different sales mechanisms or people, whatever. And I'm definitely not a great salesman. I'm very straight to the point and that sort of thing. But there are certain things that good sales individuals do, and we're all salespeople, all of us. What I've normally done is set up, the emails in a proper way depending on the type of client. And so I had 4 or 5 emails, and I would copy and paste that email, but I would tweak it out for that individual client. And then I would send it to who I thought was appropriate in the company. In 24 hours, I would call them. I don't care if they got the email or if they didn't get the email. I just wanted to make sure that they actually received an email. And if they didn't receive an email, or if the wrong person got it, I actually got the correct person's name and their information, so I can resend it out to that right individual, and then I can follow up in 3 or 4 days to the correct person saying, hey, I talked to so-and-so, and she told me to forward this to you. And so it doesn't become all about you. It becomes about that conversation of that individual that you spoke with, and it's a better connection. It's like, oh, okay. And at worst case, they don't need you. But at best case, if they miss the email, they could say, oh, well, let me look at it. And you're kind of opening the door. It's all about opening that door for that level of trust without being too pushy.
Well, and you started to talk a little bit about referral incentives a minute ago.
Yeah.
I personally don't use those, but just jumping back to that, one of the I always ask people who approach me how they found me, and especially if the same person sent me a possible client, like at the very least, I'm sending that person a nice note saying, "Hey, thank you for sending me these folks. Like, I really appreciate that. Is there any way I can help you out, or is there anything that you're looking for?"
Or refer people back to them for other things. Yeah.
I mean, we're kind of wired and socialized to look for reciprocation.
Yeah.
So it's really rude to take and take and take. And you also don't want to be the person who's always giving, because it gets exhausting, and you do notice that on some level.
Yeah.
So at the very least, you need to balance it by saying, "Hey, you've been super helpful. What can I do for you?"
Expressing gratitude just in general when the client has done something or whatever is a very good social lubricant, really.
Well, and especially when you're talking about business, we tend to think, oh, it's business, it's numbers, it's suits, it's all these processes, and it's really about the people. And people like to feel wanted and appreciated and enjoyed. And
Noticed.
or even with your client, you have a good relationship with them. Sometimes it's totally appropriate just to just say, hey, I really enjoy working with you. I'm so glad that you found me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that's powerful, and that's part of the relationship building process. And it's really easy to forget about it.
Yeah, and I don't say that to clients I'm not particularly happy about, too. So it's actually
don't
genuine.
Lie.
Yeah.
Do not lie and say that you like your client if you despise them.
Yeah.
We have a hand up. So.
Yeah, this is a little bit broad, but I wanted to bring it up. What would you consider to be the more critical guidance that you could give to a person in a traditional game industry role, considering transitioning into a consultancy type of role?
Put together a list of everyone you know. Go through your Facebook, go through your LinkedIn, if you have Twitter, whatever channels that you have, make lists of every single person that you know. It will be surprisingly long. And also, I like to note things like if there are special notes or like points or how I know them, or if someone introduced me, of what the social circle is. For instance, like when I meet people, I might know them through the Georgia Game Developers Association. I might know them through the Circus Arts communities or through my college alumni groups. Also look at it like, where are your circles? Like, again, college alumni groups are great. LinkedIn actually has this fantastic feature where you can search by alumni and industry and fields. So you can reach out to them because you have a reason to. But start with that list and just start getting in touch with everyone on it and circling back around so that you can build relationships before you actually need things from them.
In touch with them, in terms of approach, how does that work?
Hey, Kat, I just looking at my phone and I realized we hadn't talked for ages. Like, how are things going?
Yeah.
What are you up to these days?
Well, he meant methods, I think.
Oh, yeah, okay, if you've worked with these
yeah.
people before, then just make it a social call the first time. Like, don't be swarm and be like, hey, I started my own business, come
got
hire me. Because that always
business.
comes up, you're like, oh, okay, I
Want
haven't
your
talked to you in
money?
like 2 years, hi. Yeah, so I mean, just make it a social thing. Like, hey, how's it going? We haven't, like, I'm in town, we're visiting, we should go have a beer or something together. Just it's really just curating those personal relationships, and then you can always bring it back around to be, oh, hey, well, what are you doing now? This is what I'm doing. I just started my own little consultancy thing, and make it more natural that way. And you don't have to do like all of them all at once. Just start small, hit up a few people every now and then. Like you can even make it like your Tuesday afternoon thing. Like just like
setting a schedule is good.
Yeah.
And keep track of when you're actually contacting people. Like
Yeah.
I have a column in my list that says date last email. Because that way you can just sort of knock through like 10, 20 emails in a day. And you're like, oh, okay, I've contacted them yesterday, maybe not today.
Yeah, and whether you email, phone call, or text, it really depends on the relationship we have with the individual.
Yeah.
And in, how long the relationship is and the gaps and all that, what's kind of appropriate.
Because it's really, you can spot it from a mile away when somebody just wants something from you.
Yeah.
It's totally fake, insincere, we can tell.
I will say, if you have an urgent ask and you haven't talked to somebody in a while, it's nice to, instead of do the, hey, how are you, blah, 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 how's your wife, blah, 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 and then ask. I prefer the ask up front, because then it's more honest, it's more genuine. And then when you say afterwards at the end of your email or communication, so how have you been, it feels real.
I will also note, if you are thinking about going the consulting route, do your homework and make sure that there's really a need for that particular set of services, and that it's not totally flooded with a lot of other people doing the same thing. Just because if there's not a need, it's going to be really hard to make something happen.
A lot of times you have to broaden your skills to
Yeah.
be more general a lot of times.
Or broaden your industry. Like a lot of the stuff I do isn't actually in games. I help gamify really random crap that has nothing to do with games. And so it's like, don't always be like, well, I can only work for gaming clients. Like, nah, you can work for health organizations, edutainment. It's all over the place.
Also, the hourly rate or salary rate you make at work is not the rate you need to make
Double it.
to.
Double or triple.
You're not going to be working 40 hours a week necessarily, especially when you start. So you need to figure out for that time where you are working on the business or emailing your contacts and stuff, how much does your hourly rate need to go up to make up for that time?
Because you are realistically going to be
Taxes
working
and
easily
all that, too.
8 to 20 hours a week, just running your business, generating new clients, and taxes.
Unbillable hours.
Yeah, and,
Paperwork.
yeah. and seriously, like what I tell my clients and what I do myself is, like every time a check comes in, I just take half of it and dump it into a separate account to make sure that I have enough to cover business expenses and taxes. Because small business owners often get screwed on the tax front.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't stress that even more. As a small business owner, you're targeted by the IRS, period.
Yeah.
And if you have a very good accountant that knows how to deal with it, that's very important. And if you get in trouble, you have not necessarily done anything wrong. They just don't. Sometimes they will not accept your deductions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They
Once
don't
you can
fully
afford an
understand
accountant,
you're
get an
screwed.
accountant.
Yeah,
So-
get an accountant before you even get an
Quickly,
attorney. If you
yeah.
have to.
Yeah.
Your accountant is the person
Yeah.
who will save your ass in so many ways.
Yeah, the laws have changed, so they used to be able to go back 7 years. I think they can go back 2 or 3 now. I forget what it was. But again, there was a lot of money put into the IRS. And to be honest with you, the IRS doesn't produce any money for the country at all.
Are you kidding? They're one of the biggest money-making agencies in the federal government.
No, I mean the money they cost.
Well, it's not that related to gaining
Their
clients.
cost outweighs the amount they actually bring in.
That's not true. That's not true.
Time out. Time out. Short version.
Politics,
Get a
no.
good accountant.
Yes, get a good accountant.
Get a good accountant and just like plan for the very, very worst. Like,
Or at the very least,
Yeah.
get TurboTax and buy the extra protection.
The extra protection, but like
Don't do your taxes by hand.
it can be really easy to let that stuff sort
Yeah.
of slide because you're like, well, I want to focus on my clients and I want to focus on doing the work, but really keeping up with that throughout the year so you're not really surprised is helpful.
Estimated
there's
taxes.
Quarterly estimated taxes
self-employment taxes.
is hard to keep calculating, so it's better to just really get on top of it right away. Are there any tools you guys particularly like to use for that stuff?
FreshBooks.
Yeah.
I mean, I have an accountant and I have FreshBooks, and it
Yeah.
also has like time tracking stuff.
Yeah.
So,
I use a combination of Harvest app and FreshBooks. Yeah.
That's good.
yeah.
So if you are already working, working within the industry within a traditional role, you probably already have a great deal of visibility within your social circle as it pertains to who's doing what and who has use for your role within the industry. As it pertains to going outside of that and into a consultancy, are there any, do you leverage that differently, or are there any other ways of getting outside of just your social
It depends a bit on your skill set and what you're looking to do specifically, because sometimes having a really incredible website with great SEO and like a wonderful blog can bring you a lot of business and traffic. It just depends on like if it's a sort of thing that people can understand really easily. Like being an artist, you have certain options because it's a very visual, easy to digest, easy to assess thing.
If you're really good at something in particular, put talks in at conferences. Get your name out there.
God,
People will then go
yes.
see you talk about crap. And you're like, you must know about stuff. You were up there on the stage. I mean, just there's little things. Just like
Yeah.
make sure you're always popping up in different little places so people then see you and remember.
Yeah, you were referring to your social circles, but I think a couple of things that we mentioned is reaching out to on LinkedIn. There are groups on LinkedIn. There are
Groups on
there's
Facebook.
Meetup.com. There's
Yep.
groups on Facebook.
Like your IGDA meetings. all
There's
those
whole
things.
was it the ham list for agencies? What is it called? I forget
The-
what. Yeah, the Creative
Yeah.
Ham. They have a
Yeah.
list of all the agencies.
And network with
know.
people doing the same thing you are, because sometimes they'll be too busy and they'll refer people
Yeah.
to you.
Other freelancers can be one of your biggest resources.
That's how I got my first like game industry freelancing gig. Somebody was too busy and handed it to me because they knew
Yeah.
I was looking.
Yep.
Yeah.
We also had a
oh,
question or
sorry.
comment over there.
I'm curious if any of you had that experience with trying to get clients to pay an invoice and 60 days go by, 90 days go by, and nothing's happening.
Well, I'm an asshole, and I have and I just have like on every single invoice like when stuff is due and a late fee, and I
Yeah.
follow up aggressively on them.
Yeah.
You can also set automated reminder emails.
Yeah.
Like that's the lovely thing about FreshBooks. They will do
Yeah.
that for you. You just
Yeah.
set up your messages.
Yeah, after a certain number of days, like regardless of who the client is, I will just have it. say,
And if you're
"Hey."
unlucky like I am, one of your clients will be one of those people who will never pay you. It happens, it's sucky, it's terrible. Make sure your contracts are as watertight as possible. So if it is a crap ton of money that they're on the hook for, maybe consider legal options. If it's really not that much, you can make it a learning experience and be very upset.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to remind them, because
oh,
I know
yeah.
people
Some
who
people are
feel
busy.
bad like about asking people to pay them.
I don't.
No,
Not anymore.
I say it in a nice
With
way.
the
I say, I can't really
introversion,
pay my
it can
guys
be
unless
awkward
you
to talk about
finish
the
up
money.
The last
Yeah.
payment, sort of.
Yeah.
Well, the other
Oh, okay.
and it is really rare that people just won't pay you. I mean, and those are the shitty people that I don't feel bad about.
Yeah.
Like,
The
avoid those
blacklisted,
people
never
at all
again.
costs.
Yeah.
One other thing that you can also do is, again, depending on industry and norms and what precisely is in your contract, I work with deposits. I always get at least a deposit,
Yeah.
and sometimes it will be, depending on the term of the agreement, what I'm actually working on with people, it might be like a one-time deposit and then payment in full at certain deliverables, or, I mean, deposits at least like help cut some of the risk on that, because
And also from the client too, because they
Yeah.
like to be getting stuff in between, so you're reaching milestones together. Because it's also risky for them to be like a 3-month thing, and they won't hear from you, and they're like, "Are you actually working?"
hello, anybody back there?
And make sure when you send the
Hello?
invoice, it's actually descriptive, so they
Yes.
know what they got for it. So
Yeah.
it's not just like, wow, this is a lot of money.
Yeah, I tend
Yeah.
to have weekly client meetings, so I'll have them sit in with the team or part of the team in order to identify some of the things that are being done.
Yeah, and sometimes you really did just get screwed, and you can't get it back.
But
Yeah, it's
you're
usually too
mentioning
small to-
deposits. Maybe we can expand on that a little bit. I mean, I tend to do a 10 to 50% deposit, or I'll do 1 month's worth of work depending on the man hours or the number of people. And it's the bigger the project, the smaller the percentage, of course. So if you're working on an estimated $500,000 project, you're not going to ask for $250,000 up front. It's just he's just kind of like, that's not going to
You
happen.
funny.
Yeah, like,
Well,
it's not going to happen in that way.
And also repeat clients too. Like your
Yeah.
first clients, I tend to actually ask for more upfront because I don't know
Yes.
who they are.
Yeah.
And while I might have some really good word of mouth referrals, it's still like there's a trust issue there. Like you have to build that up. And then repeat clients, if I know they've always been very punctual and very awesome, sometimes I don't mind getting paid at the end because I know
Yeah.
they're always like willing to
They're
pay.
good
Like
for
within
it.
2 to 3 days, I'm like, that's fine. We'll handle it, in a month. It'll be all right.
Yeah, and
But you were mentioning if we had any nightmare clients. I remember, I've been doing this for a while, so I remember a few. And I think one of the things we mentioned is to know when to cut your losses and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And so I remember at the tail end of a project, there was like, I don't know, 15,000 owed or something, whatever. And I knew they weren't going to pay. They just didn't have the money. But they needed stuff done. And so I figured, I've been working with this client long enough to know what they have and what they don't. I can smell how much money they have. I can already anticipate this. And they said, well, we need to get this other stuff done. I said, okay, I tell you what, we'll get these things done, which they're almost done anyway. We just haven't posted them yet. So we're kind of ahead of the game there. I said, well, I just need half of it to get these things done. And they agreed to it. We got it done. Boom. Let's close it out.
Cuts your losses, gets you something out of it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if there's a monthly stipend or hourly stipend, it's like, are you really cutting your losses, or are you kind of gaining? Because then you would have to deal with them for the other bit of money, and then you have to negotiate more work for it. And,
Well,
If you've got receipts that have already gone bad, do any of y'all have any experience with selling your receipts as opposed to like taking someone to court or what have you?
I'm sorry, selling what?
Selling your receipts.
selling the debt. If somebody
Oh.
owes you money, like have you ever tried to sell the debt?
No.
I haven't.
No.
No,
You don't want a
usually
bad
this.
rep.
No.
You always
Yeah.
want to, even
Because
if
that
you
actually
have
does get around, like, oh, you're that litigious guy.
Yeah, one bad client is equal to 20 good. You have to have like 20 good clients to kind of balance that off, and you don't want to go through that, even if the client is a totally say difficult. You kind of want to close that out in a nice way.
Yeah, I was actually at a client lunch a couple years back, and we were all, talking, joking around, and we were discussing like to hire for another. We needed something else done. We're like, oh, we need to bring someone else on, and they had been interviewing this dude, and he sounded like a great fit. And then we got a random cold call during the lunch. It was like honestly the best thing that ever happened. They were like, we heard you were looking at this guy. Don't. He's just sued the last 3 companies he's worked for. We're like, thank you so much. Oh my God. So yeah, you don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, it becomes the hill you die on, you know?
Yeah, the risk to reward ratio is very
Yeah.
skewed.
And, like, just, I still cry about the $5,000 I will never get from this one company, like, from time to time, but it's not worth going after.
Well, and sometimes it's also totally appropriate to fire clients.
Yes.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
because they aren't paying you, maybe because every single agreement, the scope creep is so much that when they kick up a fuss, they're just hard to work with.
Yeah,
It's
personality
fine to-
conflicts are fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to simplify your working arrangement. We had a client that wanted to get X amount, and we had them for a while, and then they wanted to do this. They want one person that did, that did old Flash AS2 and Unity and database connectivity or whatever. And I said, well, I don't really know that many people that do all that stuff well, and I don't even remember AS2. It's like 15, 20 years old. It's old Flash. It just doesn't exist.
It's like dinosaurs.
And so I said, but I can get a resource that can probably work out a lot of these things, but it's going to be on an hourly time-based material. And if it's just one resource for like 2 months or whatever, I will set it up in Basecamp, like project management, and set your major goals up and say, hey, you're the client, you can manage that, because I don't want to get in that I don't want to get involved with that. As long as they understand that you're providing a resource that's good at what they do, then you can manage it that way. But when you have projects that are 3 people or more, you want to be involved at least I do on the management side, because I make my money off of other people. I make my money off my time, and I get a little slither off everyone else, and that's how I pay my bills, and that's also how grouping those things together, I reduce the cost for the client.
And firing the client doesn't have to look like you sucked. I don't like you anymore. Go away. Like,
It's not like
don't
The
do that.
Apprentice.
Yeah,
You're
you're
fired.
fired. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, don't do that. It can look like handing it over to another person you think would work better with them, and then that leaves your reputation intact.
Well, it's not overpromising what you can actually do, and sometimes it's fair to say, hey, this has grown to a place where like I can't give you my best work, and I don't think that's what you need. Here's this other person.
Yeah.
Speaking of your other freelancers possibly being your best friends,
Because they will
I can't do it, but
reciprocate.
Michelle's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
You want to hand it off to your best friend, do you?
Well, not if they're a horrible
I
client.
had a- I had a, client-
if they're good for it.
I had a
Yeah, if they're good
client
for
that was very difficult at the end, and that's because they ran out of money and they still wanted a lot of stuff. And so they didn't like me because I could not continue work, and he was a little abrasive. But he liked my developer a lot. And so I was actually afraid that he would talk bad about me. And so what I did, I had to be very humble and have the developer they loved form that relationship, because I couldn't form that relationship because I'm about, you're not paying me to do this extra work free or whatever. And so I made an arrangement with him and the developer and saying, hey, I'll go ahead and stay out of this, and you like working with so-and-so and all that other stuff. And that's how I got the good recommendation from him. It wouldn't have come from me. It only came from the person he actually liked. So there's certain things you have to kind of be humble and bite your tongue on and circumvent in a different way to handle it. Because at the end of the day, you're not here, well, hopefully you're not here for your personal ego. You're here to do good work, and you're here to be successful. And sometimes successful's not always what's right, like what you consider, hey, I did this the right way. It's about making sure that the client's intact, your reputation's intact, the project is done within a certain with certain positive parameters.
That also actually brings up a really great point, which is that for all that we've just been talking about maximizing your personal networks, if you set up your own consulting firm or company, your company is a separate entity from you.
Yes.
So in this case, the reputation of Troy's company and that relationship was more important than his ego or him actually being the person to form that relationship. And it's a really weird balancing act sometimes, because I mean it's kind of like you go to that's a tangent.
Well, don't
That was the tangent
don't take
about
stuff
you.
personal, I guess.
Yeah.
What we're saying, you really can't.
Yeah.
I mean, if
You
someone's
can't
not,
be a prima donna in this industry. No one wants to.
yeah, because that makes you look difficult to work with, and maybe you are difficult and you need to be less difficult. Who knows?
And these are things that you can work on too. I mean, if you're getting feedback that people find you hard to work with, ask them for behaviorally specific examples.
And
of
then
things that you
don't
did.
argue.
Yeah.
Don't argue with
don't get
what they say.
defensive.
Yeah.
What do you mean they think I'm an asshole?
Yeah.
That's totally unrealistic. Yeah, no.
I've had some people I know send out sort of not like a satisfaction survey at the end, but sort of something along those lines, where hey, I just was wondering, were you happy with this process? Was there anything you would like to
Like standard, what did you like most, least, how can I improve?
yeah.
And stuff like that. And you can also, actually, those are also great, because if you send out some sort of like feedback request, you can oftentimes pull out testimonials
Yeah.
about working with you.
Yeah. I like to ask for permission to
Yeah, oh
post
God,
it
yeah.
publicly.
always ask for permission
Yeah.
before like saying,
Yeah.
this particular client said
Yeah.
I'm fabulous.
Yeah,
Well,
because
even
some
if they
clients also
recommended me
don't even
on-
want to know that they hired you, and you need to ask permission
Yeah.
before you put on your website, like,
Yeah.
I worked for these people, because
Yeah.
someone would be like,
Your
"Ooh."
contract should be
Do
clear
not,
about whether
do not
yeah.
assume that you have
Yeah.
that permission, and get
Yeah.
it in writing in your email.
Yeah,
at
most of the
least.
agencies that you
Yeah.
work with don't want you to show their work. So one trick is to actually put it in a contract, and usually they'll read that and they'll say, well, no, you have to get permission anyway. So you reword the contract to get permission, and as soon as it's done, you request permission. And then there's going to be 50% a chance that you'll be able to show that. But the industry's changed, not just in gaming, but just in the interactive field in general, that, I don't know, like 10 years ago, they were much more open to use really good freelancers or contractors and stuff like that. And it becomes a lot more difficult as you have more experience. You actually get blackballed from a lot of agencies for two reasons. Number one is the industry has changed, where a lot of the agencies just don't exist anymore, and so they want to keep the clients that they have. And the other thing is that if you have better awards than them, they don't want the client to know that you're doing the work. So you have to be very careful on how you want to present yourself. Either you want to be a consultant or you want to be an agency or whatever it is. And just know that one means something else than the other as far as getting work.
We also had a hand up a minute ago.
Any particular concerns working? We've spoken a lot about customers and customer interaction. Any particular concerns or challenges and solutions for non-customer stakeholders?
Could you give an example of that?
Well, just
Yeah.
you're working on a larger project and your specific specialization, so you may be plugged into an environment where you're working with a heterogeneous group of internal employees, other contractors, what have you. Have y'all encountered any unique challenges there? And what were the
It can be a little intimidating sometimes. Like your process, you feel like you need to change your contract or your process or whatever. Because like the first time I worked with Playdom, they had a very specific contract that they always used, and it wasn't the same as mine. And so feeling empowered enough to be like, I really need to introduce these clauses, or being able to push back against some of the, like, if they had a particular process and I thought that there was a better way to do something or a preferable way to do something, feeling brave enough essentially to be like, I know you're hugely successful and big and you always do it this way, but
they hired you for a reason.
They did, yeah.
Be confident in your skill set. Be respectful, too, of their process. Like,
Yeah.
if you were getting thrown into a team meeting and you normally only deal with the product manager, yes, be respectful of, like, who the people you're dealing with. Let them speak. They have their own ideas and processes they work with day to day. But then they did hire you for a skill set that they were lacking.
Yeah.
So be confident and, like, bring up new options. That's why you're there. And, yeah, don't, like, step on feet and, like, tell people they're dumb and stuff. No. But,
Definitely don't do that.
Yeah, just, but, insert yourself where appropriate.
Yeah.
And also know which battles you actually need to be fought.
Oh, that too.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can't fight all of them. Sometimes you shouldn't.
Actually know who the client is. The client is not the end client. The client is who's paying you. And I think a lot of developers that work for me, I have to remind them that. I said, no, you have to go through the project manager to get this stuff. Even if you talk to the client directly, that's a big no-no. Because if you circumvent that, you not only affect the management or the variation of the visible management, you affect the whole team, because one decision could affect 4, 5, 6, 7 components. But but someone else talked to the client, the end client directly and made it okay. And so know where your paycheck comes from, who you're working with, and if there's issues that have to be resolved, they should be resolved just like you would any other direct client very soon. I had an incident where I had a good friend that was managing one of the projects. I had to fire him. It's not the fact that he wasn't my friend. It's the fact that he felt that he was right about a certain thing, and I didn't care. I didn't care who was right. All I know is that you're arguing with the other project manager, which is from the client, and you're arguing about something that does not resolve itself, and it doesn't really matter who's right or wrong. And so I had to intervene and save the project. And I said, well, guys, I don't really want to talk about this. I brought them both, And I said, well, would you agree that we're behind 2 weeks? They said, yes. Would you agree that these are the things that need to happen in order to get back on track? Yes. I said, then let's move forward with that. And one of the requirements was to release that project manager off that job. And again, he felt that he was right. Well, I think arguing, in a certain tone is not productive, because he doesn't affect one person. He affects 8 other people. What happens if the end client says, screw this company, because their project manager's being difficult? Well, then I have to release 8 people, and those 8 people have families, and they have, they have a life to live and all that other stuff. So I have to look at it as if, hey, you're not doing what you need to do, and you're refusing to do it. I said, we're friends. I'm gonna have to let you go off this project to save it for everyone else. He was very upset, but a week later he came in. He said, Troy, you did the absolutely right thing to do, and I respect you for it. So at the end, you need to know who the client is and how to work well with them in order to make it work within the parameters.
You also want to identify, like, who's the decision maker, especially when it's a bigger company. Like, who's the one you have to please and make happy, and that can be sometimes hard, because they'll be like, oh, we want everyone on the team to have equal input, and that's not like, sometimes that's true, but that's really rare. It's a great ideal. And the way I usually try and figure that out is, when I get a new client, I try and put together a client brief, and I put key stakeholders, decision makers. I want that identified, like, officially, informally, so I know this is the person. This is at the end of the day, their word goes.
Putting together a matrix of stakeholders, what are some of the columns that you actually consider important?
In terms of types of stakeholders, or?
Additional data that sort of qualifies, who's the critical stakeholder?
I think it depends on the type of service you're providing. Like I've done a lot of graphic design, and so for that design brief, essentially, I want to know stuff about the structure of the company. But like, you don't want to get too, like, if they have it on their website or something, you want to just collect it yourself and not bug them with it. But try and get as much context as you can for what they do, what their goals are, what this project is, what its goals are, and then what your piece is, and all the things you think might affect or influence you. So it really can vary quite a bit, but if you try and think about, okay, what are the factors at play, and get those identified.
Yeah, one major, when you're talking about key stakeholders, one major thing that I see, especially like a lot of projects we work are small. They're 3, 4, 5, 6 man teams or whatever, right? And sometimes they're 4-man teams, another 4-man team, another 4-man team. So they're not like huge, huge projects and stuff. But what I have always found out is that the client, because those budgets are smaller, they always want to put their hands in the cookie jar more so than is beneficial for the project. Now they're the client, but you know, as a consultant or a manager or whatever, you have to identify when to talk to that major stakeholder and remind them on the communication methods. They may request something or whatever, Skype conversations or whatever. The managers need to be on those because, and I see it almost every single meeting, they try to creep to get directly to the developer to do A, B, and C. And so I have to remind the client, I said, hey, I have to make sure I'm on the meeting on it. And I'm very polite, but I'm sort of blunt. And those are the type of clients that actually like me. I said, because if you ask him to do A, B, and C, he will not be able to finish his current load in a proper time.
Yeah, you have to protect your team.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you got to say, is
Set
this something
boundaries.
you want, or is this something that's necessary for the project, and are you willing to push the date back?
In order to be able to do that sort of predictably, how much do you guys individually utilize formal project management process versus more of an informal? I mean, do you guys actually sort of, and how do you separate that from the project management processes that you're maybe plugging into as either a consultant or as a business?
In gaming, you have a formal outline, but an informal process a lot of times, because a lot of the functionality is usually not engineered out fully until you get to it. And so you have a kind of a mixed process, but you have a process that's that everyone's using.
And it can
it's
depend on the
different per
scope
client.
of the project and
Yes, the
each
scope of the
client.
yes.
And also your personal preferences can play into how you want to approach it. Because some people really need to give themselves a structure to work within to make sure they don't forget anything and stay on track and all that. And some people just intuitively do pretty well with it. But you should make sure that if you're trying to do it free form, maybe start with structure first, so you know you're actually hitting all the pieces. And
It also varies
Yeah,
widely
example.
if you're working remotely or in the client's office. If you are working with them directly in their office, adopt whatever process they're
Yeah.
doing. If they're using some crazy version of fake Agile, but they think it's the best, just roll with it. Don't try to change things that they think are working. It's not worth it. But if you're working in your own home office, you can do whatever you want. I mean, it's your own time management what works best for you at that point, and then make sure you just hit their deliverables and you're fine.
And sometimes working remotely, it helps to have more structure because
Yes.
I'm
working out of my
Because you have
house
to
in my
expand that
pajamas.
structure to the other developers of your team.
Yeah.
So they have to kind of go along the lines of what you.
and they don't see you. They don't necessarily have those casual conversations where you would normally like
I
check
tell them
in or
turn
say a
on
little
their video.
something.
I want to see what you look like this morning.
No,
And kind of on that note,
Video
I don't
phone
do
calls at certain times during the day. No.
and kind of on that note, we actually need to wrap it up. So, because we're getting like happy thumbs up signals from the back. But yeah, Troy has some excellent parties planned for this evening on the 16th floor, and the rest of us are around for the rest of the weekend. So just come talk to us.
Yeah,
'cause
free liquor,
people-
prizes. We're giving away shirts and Lego stuff.
Oh, and there was
And-
also sorry.
No, go ahead.
So
I'm
we've got
done.
parties, and then we've also got the Ask an Expert booth. Just kind of talk to people about business stuff in the expo hall. Schedule's there, but Yeah, thank you all for coming, and just come
Thank you.
find us afterwards
Yeah.
in about 30 seconds.
You're all in it, huh?
It's actually a light schedule this year.
Really?
I have a thing
I
at
just
3:30.
volunteer for one party.
Yeah,
That was-
it's the
I just
co-talk.
wanted to party.